everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to today's CAFETA webinar. We are live on July 24th. If we have any first timers here today, know that our CAFETA webinars get their name from the Greek word for learning. And today you're going to be learning how to address management challenges in a post-COVID world from Russ Siegel, who is the Executive Director of the Sequoia Fund, a native CDFI. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also happy that you could be here with us this afternoon. If you could follow along as I read the disclaimer aloud, this webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. And a friendly reminder, we have our copyright infringement law pictured here. So the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. Before we get going, I want you to know how to interact here on the Adobe environment for the webinar. So if you look to the top of your screen, you'll see a hand raised with a plus sign. Know that with that hand raise, you can signal that you're raising your hand, signal that you agree, disagree, you could show applause or laughter. You could even signal requests like asking the instructor to speak louder or to slow down, please. And now your screen should look similar to this graphic here. So all the way to the bottom left, you will see a pod that says Files. Here you can download a copy of today's slides. The next box over says Web Links. There you'll find a link to today's webinar feedback survey, a link to join our weekly newsletter, a link to connect with us on LinkedIn, or even to download the Adobe Connect app should you wish to. Finally, all the way over to the right, we have the chat pod available. So this is how you'll be able to communicate with the instructor as well as the NLC staff. Russ has said that this is going to be a very engaging webinar, and he's going to be asking y'all some questions. So I hope that you'll use the chat and answer him when the time comes. All you'll have to do is click into that box where it says type here, type in your message, and then you can either hit the enter button or you can click on that up arrow button and that'll submit it into the chat and we'll be able to see it. You can ask your questions there, make comments, answer questions that he has for you. And also, if you end up having any kind of tech support issues, let me know in the chat and I will do my best to help you navigate it. Just a heads up, you are most tech support problems can be solved by just exiting and then re-entering the meeting room. Just a heads up. All right, guys, before we get started, let's go ahead and start using the chat box now. Feel free to introduce yourself, let us know where you're joining us from, your tribal affiliation, and the professional role or job that you have in Indian country. And while y'all are getting the chat box going, it is with great pleasure that I introduce today's instructor, Russ Siegel. And Russ, I'm going to hand it off to you now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And welcome, everybody. Yeah, if you would, please go ahead and put some information over here in the chat box. That's going to help me kind of customize this a little bit today as we go, just to know everybody's role, what you're doing. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and let me know if you directly supervise anyone. And if you do, about how many people do you directly supervise? That's going to help us out tremendously as we work through some of the challenges. And it's funny that we're still talking about COVID, 4 or 5 years later here, 4 years after the start of the pandemic, because it changed so much in how we work and what we do and how we interact with other people. So you could probably see the gray in the beard here a little bit. I'm a Gen Xer. I think confession's good for the soul. I'll just go ahead and put that out there. I'm a Gen X person. We are the forgotten generation. While the boomers and the millennials and the Gen Zers are all hating on each other, we're just kind of sitting on the sidelines saying, nobody pays us any attention anyway. But I think it does inform how I view other people in the workplace and how other people view me. I have a lot of younger employees, and we're going to get to some of what we have done at Sequoia Fund. We'll talk a little bit about some changes we made post-COVID, some things that we have ongoing. Excuse me. And one of those was a grand experiment that we have stuck with because it turned out to work pretty well. Okay, I'm just giving everybody a look here to see what we have in terms of, okay, board member, former executive director. Okay. Don't supervise anyone. That's okay. At some point you may, and again, this is, I think, going to help on both ends of the spectrum. I don't think that just because we don't supervise anyone, we should take the rest of the day off and just skip this webinar. There's a lot of value here, because even if we don't supervise someone, we work with other people, and just being able to interact with other people in a positive way, preparing to supervise someone, and being supervised by someone, being the boss ain't all that. Sometimes we can get a lot done uh, just working for someone else, and being able to be a better team member. But we got a lot of ground to cover today, and I want everybody to make sure that you're keeping your hand over the keyboard here so you can chat as we go through the program today. Please throw out any questions, throw out any challenges. I would love to be able to address specific issues that you're dealing with, or that you have faced, or that you may think you will face in the workplace, because this is just a very interesting time. And yeah, the last 4 years have really been a challenge. So let's jump right in. Very simple today. We want to become familiar with current management challenges. And let's face it, some of us, we actually present some of those management challenges. I know that I have in the past presented my own management challenges to former bosses. We want to better understand where our employees are coming from. And we want to explore some strategies for making the workplace stronger, more productive, and happier. I want to focus for a moment on this stock photo. I'm not sure what the photographer was thinking when they take a stock photo. I'm not sure what any photographer is thinking when they take a stock photo. A lot of times you see people gathered around a laptop with their fists in the air going, yay, I don't know what, maybe they all hit the lottery or something. But this particular stock photo struck me. And I want to point out a few things. Number one, we've got a virtual meeting here. We've got an older person who is on the screen. We have younger people who are in the room together, so they're not with the older person. It doesn't necessarily have to be an older person who is remote, but notice the look on her face versus the look on the faces of the people in the room together. We have one who's smiling. The person in the screen looks like she might be scowling or a little bit more serious. Makes you wonder if the camera's on so that she can see everyone who's sitting together. But the person who's smiling is actually looking over at a coworker. Are they texting each other? Are they in this meeting and they're texting each other, and they're not letting the boss in on that side conversation? And so Samuel here in the chat has noted that you don't supervise anyone, but you have a fully remote organization and would like to learn more about working effectively. This is one of those things that people have had to navigate since COVID. Is how do we do this virtual thing in an effective way? How do we do this in a way where everybody can work together? I was in a virtual meeting with our board a few weeks ago, and we had a couple people who were sitting in the office together, much like the people in this photo. And I would say something, and as an older boss of younger employees, I sometimes get a little paranoid. What are they saying about me? And sure enough, they would look at each other. They would kind of give each other the side eye and grin, or they would laugh or something. And I was thinking, what did I just say that made them do that? Well, it turns out they were laughing at the UPS guy who had just come into the office. So it had nothing to do with me, or so they said. But virtual, because we're not all in the same room, we're not all together. Sometimes this gives us a little bit of paranoia on both sides, and we want to get free of that today. We want to make sure that we are working effectively, even in remote or hybrid situations. I think there's a lot of new terminology that's floating around out there We're going to get to that. I want to talk about some significant shifts that may bring up some different terms in your head. We had this remote work revolution at the beginning of COVID, just like in schools, when schools, and maybe you had school age children during the pandemic, and you saw firsthand how schools were scrambling to try to figure out how to do school in a virtual world when everything they had done for generations was built around face-to-face student-teacher interaction. And workplaces were no different. We were scrambling, trying to figure out how to get things done and in this new environment. I would like to think that Sequoia Fund was a little bit ahead of the curve because we had already been talking about this thing we'd been seeing in the news, this COVID-19. We'd heard the word pandemic and people were thinking, travel's still okay. People are still working and moving and taking vacations, and it may not be a big deal, but as the person at the top of that pyramid, one of our jobs is to look out over the horizon and see what are the possibilities, not only in the opportunities, but also in the threats. What are the opportunities and what are the dangers out there that we could run into? And so we started having early conversations about what happens if we have to move to a Zoom-based workplace. What happens if we have to take everything home and just work from home for a while? And we started early. So about the time everything shut down, we were ready, but we still didn't really have it all figured out. We thought we did, and I think again we were a little bit ahead of the curve, but we certainly had a lot more learning to do. I think during this time, people realized they didn't like being shut up at home all the time, but they certainly liked being home. I know for one, I enjoyed being near my refrigerator. I enjoyed being able to go out in the afternoon and take a walk with my wife. I enjoyed being able to set a schedule that worked for me. My body clock, my circadian rhythm works much differently from some of my employees, and I've got a lot of these morning people on my staff. I'll never understand them. I pick up my stride about 2 p.m. and I'm good till about 10 o'clock at night. But by everyone being at home, we could set our own schedule. We could get things done, and I felt like we were very productive. In fact, when we started to monitor our productivity went sky high, which led to other issues. We're going to talk about some of those other issues in a little bit, but just when you think you're stuck at home and you're not going to be productive, productivity goes through the roof. But then we have other things to deal with. We have employee well-being to deal with. When you have no off switch and your people have no off switch, and somebody wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning, can't go back to sleep, so they start working, and before they know it, it's lunchtime, and they haven't had breakfast yet. Sometimes you have to be aware of just what a toll that can take on people. So employee well-being, wellness, self-care, that became a huge issue during the pandemic. And I think smart workplaces have not taken their eye off of that. I think smart workplaces are realizing that if we're not healthy, if our people are not taking care of themselves, if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be able to take care of our clients, our customers, anybody else who depends on us. So let me just say that I do see a name or two who were in yesterday's customer service webinar. But whether you think you have customers or not, you do. We have internal customers just as we have external customers. A lot of people think that customers are just the people who walk in the door and pay us and take their stuff home with them. No. Our internal customers are anyone who depends on us. If we have to do something to make sure that they can then do their work, they are one of our customers. If they depend on information flow from us, if they depend on work product from us, if they depend on something, then they are our customer. So if we start to think about our coworkers as our customers, we might be willing to take a little better care of them as well. And we might be willing to look out for them a little bit more. If we think about employee well-being in terms of customer service, we do take care of our customers. We take care of our constituents, whether you're in a tribal office that handles finance, if you're law enforcement, education, um, human services, hospital, anything like that. You do take care of the people who walk through the door, but sometimes we don't treat the people who walk in from the next office quite as well. We also saw this rise of generational conflict. Now, generational conflict is as old as humankind. Generational conflict is never going to go away, and it has always been. Younger people always think, oh, these old people, they don't know much. And the young people get looked at like, well, these young whippersnappers, and what do they know? There's always been generational conflict, but it became magnified and intensified during COVID because we had people starting to carve their own path to getting things done. And if I've got a 25-year-old employee who's working from home and says, I want to work in short bursts and I can get a lot done in 2 hours, and then I'm going to take a 2-hour break. And then I'm going to work in another 2-hour sprint, and I'm going to take another 2-hour break. Well, hey, good for them. But when they come back to the office and they want to work that same way, now we've got a little bit of headbutting going on. We got a little bit of generational conflict because maybe I'm not used to seeing that. I was used to seeing their results when they work from home. But now to watch the way they work, my generation doesn't work that way. My generation would never do that. We always said, my generation would never do that. Why doesn't this generation do blank? Well, it started to magnify that generational conflict. And because of that generational conflict, we started to see a lot of new stuff happening. We started to see the rise of quiet quitting. Quiet quitting is, my generation might call it laziness. Uh, People who fought World War II probably would never understand the concept of quiet quitting. But quiet quitting is basically just doing the bare minimum. I'm going to be here. I'm going to mark time. I'm going to do enough to keep myself off the radar in terms of staying out of trouble. And I don't want to raise too many eyebrows. I want to do just enough, but I'm not going to exert myself and do more than that. A friend of mine, Rich Slentz, wrote a book several years ago called Your Employees Have Quit and They Stayed. Now, this was pre-COVID. This was before COVID. He works with companies to increase employee engagement. He works with them to keep people engaged and in tune. And he started to see a lot of people who were quitting and staying. And that's really the worst kind of employee because they're there soaking up payroll, but they're not getting anything done. And because we don't notice it or we don't do anything about it, it spreads like a virus. And so more and more people caught on to this quiet quitting thing. It's nothing new, but again, it became magnified after COVID. But don't think it's all the employees out there doing those shenanigans, because we had bosses doing this quiet hiring thing. And quiet hiring is the practice of, I'm going to find the people who are my best employees, the people who are the most loyal. They're always on time. They get the best work done. I can always count on them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pile more work on them. I'm going to expand their job scope. We're going to expand their job scope into things that maybe they didn't do before, but I can count on them. I can count on them. They're great, so I'm going to have them do that. We actually did some quiet hiring. I'll admit that it wasn't also quiet. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but we had one employee who graduated from college during the pandemic. And I brought her on and I said, this is what we need you to do. But I also need you to do something else just because of the time we're in. So I wasn't really quiet about it, but it was the same principle, is that I took this person, we were going to hire her for one thing, but then we added something to her job description. We also have quiet cutting. Again, out there, the bosses were saying this person is not getting the job done. I just don't have it in me to fire this person. Maybe this person's been here 10 years. I just don't have it in me to fire him. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start cutting back his responsibility and his hours. And I'm going to start cutting back on things to force this person to quit. Eventually, this person will not be doing anything or making anything with us, and they'll want to leave. So quiet cutting was a way of sort of firing people. It was laying people off without having to lay people off. But back to the employee, the pendulum swings both ways, and employees started quiet vacationing. And we saw this a lot during COVID, where it wasn't just quiet vacationing, it was quiet relocation. People would leave tech companies and they would say, well, I really don't have to be in the office to work for Apple or Google or Microsoft or any of these other companies. I can live wherever I want to live. And they would move from Silicon Valley to Colorado. They'd say, I've always wanted to live in the mountains. I'm going to live in Colorado now, or I'm going to move to Tennessee or to Florida, or my parents live in Maine, and why can't I just move back across the country to be near them and take care of my parents while I work in California? So people were relocating, and then all of a sudden, pandemic's over. The companies say, it's time to come back to the office. We had a lot of employees across the country who called in and said, I don't even live there anymore, but I want to keep working here because, as you see, my productivity is still high. And if I'm getting the job done, what does it matter? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about some of that conflict that came about. And it is important to recognize that. But the people who came back to the office said, I am going to work from home. I want a hybrid schedule. I want to work from home 1 week of the month or 2 days a week or whatever. And they would work, but they would be checking email from the beach, or they would stop and check email while they're fly fishing, or stand up paddle boarding or something like that. There's a lot of other stuff going on. What this was all about, though, was people trying to carve their own path. It's not that people are lazy. It's not that people didn't want to get things done, but they wanted to get things done on their own terms. Well, the company wanted things to get done on its terms. And again, you see some of that conflict come into play there. We had a movement that kind of went away, but I think is still there in some ways. I don't think it's Mondays necessarily, but we had this thing called bare minimum Mondays, which I'm going to come into the office on Monday and I'm just going to be there. I'm just going to hang out. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to let people notice me, but don't expect a whole lot because, man, I had a rough weekend, and I'm going to do the bare minimum today just to get by, so that on Friday I can just barely get by looking forward to the weekend. And that's a pattern that started to emerge. And we might say that's laziness. I know my generation would probably identify that as a lazy streak. But we also had people out there who were career cushioning. Career cushioning, another word for career cushioning was polywork. This was the group of people who said, I really like my job. And if I can do this job, do I need 40 hours to do this job? Maybe I've figured out a way to do my 40-hour-a-week job in 20 hours or 30 hours. That leaves me a lot of other time to take on another job. So the other term that we're seeing out there is polywork, P-O-L-Y work, P-O-L-Y, poly, which means many, which means I'm going to work many jobs in the same amount of time it would have taken me to work this other job. And I'm going to make a lot more money. Maybe I'm going to work for a competitor. Maybe I'm going to do something completely different. Maybe I'm going to work a finance job during the day, and then I'm going to take a couple hours in the afternoon and go do DoorDash, or I'm going to drive an Uber or something like that. Or I'm just going to do something completely different. This gave people variety. Career cushioning and polywork started to give people variety, and it started to give them another path to their income. Now, studies have just come out. The Federal Reserve has just come out with a study, as did Bankrate. They said a lot of people, more people today are working more than one job, and it's not necessarily to pay the bills. You know, a lot of people think, oh, well, it takes 3 jobs to pay the bills. Turns out the people who are doing career cushioning, they're not using that money to pay bills. They're not paying down debt. They are paying for the things they really enjoy. They want to pay for things like extra vacations. They want to go to the beach. They want to go out to eat a few more times a week. They want to take their kids to an amusement park. They want to do some things that they would not be able to do on one salary. So this is creating a level of income that allows people to maintain a lifestyle. So discretionary income rather than necessary income. But again, the career cushioning, we started to see a lot of conflict where you come back to work and the boss says, wait a minute, I just found out you're working 2 other jobs. I don't want you to do that. Well, the argument on the employee side was, it's not affecting my work here. Why would you care? Just another one of those sources of conflict. But again, people are carving their own path. They're creating a lifestyle for themselves. And we have actually, or I personally have encouraged career cushioning among my staff. And I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. Back to the employer side, we have something called employee hoarding. And this is selfish, but I think it's a little bit smart, where we saw so many people jumping ship during the pandemic or shortly after the pandemic, where they said, okay, this company is not going to allow me to do what I want to do. They're not going to allow me to work on my own terms. So I'm going to go over here to this other company, and maybe they're not going to pay me any more money. Maybe they're going to pay me less, but I'm going to get to do things on my own terms. Well, employee hoarding is the practice of, I'm going to pay you so much that you can't justify leaving, because I know if I lose you, you're really, really good. And if I lose you, I'm not going to be able to find anyone else to take this position. So rather than putting myself in a position of having to recruit, hire, onboard, and train, I'm just going to pay you so much, or I'm going to make things so attractive to you that you don't want to leave. So employee hoarding sounds terrible, but it's only terrible for the company that wants to hire you away. If I'm hoarding you, I'm hanging on to you, but I'm giving you an incentive to stay. And I'm taking you away as an option for a competitor. Then we have coffee badging. I think this kind of goes, if you're a bare minimum Monday person, sometimes you might get into coffee badging. Coffee badging, if anybody remembers The Office. The Office, with there was an episode where Jim Halpert was going to show up at a party. He was just going to make an appearance and then leave. And the whole episode was about how Jim could not leave the party. There was always something going on that Jim couldn't leave the party. Well, Jim was trying to coffee badge. He wanted endure. He wanted to get in good with the new boss, Robert California. He wanted to ingratiate himself to this new boss, but he didn't want to really spend a lot of time at the party. Okay, think about that at the workplace. You have someone who comes in, they want to make it known that they're there. They want to make sure they sidle up to the boss at the coffee pot or the water cooler and say, "Hey, I'm here," and then they slowly drift away. Maybe they go into their office and they listen to music and they put the headphones on and they don't want to engage anybody else. Maybe they just go to a doctor's appointment and never come back the rest of the day. But coffee badging is a real thing. This is what a lot of companies are, and companies are now putting policies and programs in place to combat coffee badging, which is we're going to engage you more. We want to check in with you more just to make sure that you're not making an appearance and then disappearing on us. We have a new term. This came out in the last couple of months. I think it's been around for a while, but somebody finally put a name to it, and it's called lazy girl jobs. Now, guys, this is not exclusively for women. Don't think that people are being discriminatory out there. It just happened to be a woman who came up with this term. And a lazy girl job is a remote job that doesn't take a lot of effort, doesn't require a lot of time, but it pays disproportionately well for the amount of time and effort you have to put into the job. So you might find customer support positions. You might find that there are big box retailers or airlines, or something out there that requires you to sit around in front of a computer and wait for somebody to log in and ask a question. Maybe this is that you're a remote chat agent who's going to answer questions for Social Security or something like that. But a lazy girl job is actually, I gotta admit, sounds pretty good. And so you have a lot of people who are leaving their day-to-day job. They're picking up multiple lazy girl jobs, and they're doing career cushioning, again, on their own terms. The Great Resignation is something that we have seen and not fully recovered from, and I'm not sure that we will anytime soon. The Great Resignation signifies that point where people were just fed up and they said, "I've had enough. I'm not getting any appreciation here. I'm not making enough money to put up with this. I'm leaving." And they left. Sometimes they went to another company. Sometimes they changed careers altogether. Sometimes they went back to school. They went from being a banker to a nurse, or they went from being a nurse to a banker. You saw a lot of this job switching because people said, I'm doing something that has never really been my passion. I'm a lawyer because my dad was a lawyer, because his dad was a lawyer, because I'm a fourth generation lawyer in this little town, and this is not really what I want to do. I'm going to do something else. So it was a huge, huge shift. The biggest component of the Great Resignation, though, was that at the pandemic outset, we had a lot of people who had either retired and gone back to work. They were working their second career, their encore career, or they were working part-time just to get themselves out of the house, keep themselves busy. They were working in fast food. They were working in retail. They were working service jobs, and there are a lot of those jobs out there. They were driving buses. They were driving rental cars from one location to another. They were maybe driving RVs from the factory to the dealership. They had a lot of these jobs that are just almost tailor-made for retirees. And you had a lot of people who were getting very close to retirement. And both of those groups said, "I'm out. See ya." And they bounced. The Great Resignation really started with people who were near retirement or at retirement or post-retirement who said, "I don't want to get sick. I don't want to make my family sick. I don't know what this is going to do because nobody knows what this is all about. It's better for me to just go ahead and exit the workforce." This is one of the large components of why restaurants are not operating the same number of hours they were before. This it's why service organizations are not as responsive as they were before. This is why retailers are not operating the same hours as they were before, because we had this huge swath of dedicated, productive, experienced, knowledgeable people who exited at one time. That had a massive effect on how business is run, how office work gets done, how customers get taken care of, and how responsive our services can be to us. It was huge. And then finally, and look, this is not by any means an exhaustive list. You could probably Google another 50 different terms that people are trying to use, but these are the big ones that are making the most impact on workplaces right now. But we're going to finish with act your wage. This, I think, is more of an attitude than anything. Act your wage is simply the attitude of, if I'm not getting paid to do that, I'm not going to do it. They don't pay me enough to do this. Why am I doing the boss's work? Why am I doing work that's 2 or 3 levels above me? I'm going to act my wage. You see a lot of websites out there now that have started to post stories about what's called malicious compliance. You know, my boss wanted me to do this, and I said no. So they told me I have to do this, so I'm just going to maliciously comply with exactly what they want me to do. I'm never going to work a minute of overtime. They don't pay me for this, and so I'm just going to act my wage. We have a lot of attitudes going on here, and these 11 different terms, these are things that that are happening out there right now that are affecting people's attitude toward their work, attitude toward their coworkers, attitude toward the organizations, the companies, the tribes they work for, and about their own jobs. Some of these have even caused me to doubt, have maybe my generation has been doing it wrong all these years. Maybe these younger people have a point. You know, I can remember back to bosses who I worked for who showed zero appreciation. I used to work for a Korean War veteran who I'm quite certain he had PTSD, but at the time we didn't know what PTSD was. It was kind of a new thing being discussed. In his day, it would have been called shell shock. And there were 2 ways to look at shell shock. You were either catatonic and you ended up being institutionalized and you couldn't function, or you just sucked it up and went back to work and you went home and you did what you had to do. There was none of this gray area that showed us later on how trauma bleeds into everything we do. And there was definitely some trauma. He never really talked about the things he had seen in the Korean War, but there were certain days when Bob was the greatest boss in the world, and other days when Bob was a complete tyrant and everyone wanted to quit. The issue was here, you just didn't know which Bob you were going to get on any given day. Bob could be a great guy one day, but if his gout was acting up the next day and his knee hurt, he started thinking about things that hurt, and he was a tyrant. So I've worked for bosses before, and maybe if I'd had some of this attitude of, could I do some bare minimum Monday? Could I quiet quit? What could I get away with? Maybe I would have taken better care of my mental health, but I was not in a place to do that because my generation said, put your head down, work hard. So remember, we've got all this conflict going on out there in the workplace. And we've got employers who were forced to make huge shifts in their operations. We had to come up with new protocols, new ways of doing things, new ways for customers to communicate with us, new ways for our teams to communicate at various times and about various things. And it was just impossible for us to have all hands meetings at that time. So how do we do this in an effective way? The face of the workforce was different at the end of the pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, we had a lot of older people in the workforce who weren't there at the end of the pandemic because of that great resignation. There are a lot of employers today who want to flip a switch and go right back to 2019. Let's just take it back to where everybody came in the office, everybody kept their head down, everybody did their work, and everybody just did what they were told, and we didn't have to think about all this. But the employees, hey, a lot of them who could retire, again, they did. They said, this is not worth it. We don't know what's going on here. This is a brand new thing. We're out. Generation Z faced a lot of hiring challenges. And this is where I'm going to stop here and tell you a little story about Faith. Faith is one of our employees at Sequoia Fund. She is our risk manager, which means she manages our portfolio. After a loan closes, she's the one who perfects the collateral. She maintains the collateral, monitors it, makes sure everybody's paying and doing what they're supposed to be doing. She monitors our delinquencies and our defaults. She sends out collection letters. She makes sure that people do what they're supposed to do as they repay their loan. And Faith was not supposed to be working for us today. Well, not at the time anyway. Faith had been an intern with us since she was in high school. And we loved Faith. We thought Faith was great. And when Faith went to college and she decided she was going to major in business, she had told us all along, I'm going to work for Sequoia Fund someday. I'm going to work for Sequoia Fund, and I'm going to work for Sequoia Fund until I either retire or until I get elected chief. One of those things is going to happen, and then I'll leave. But until then, I'm working for Sequoia Fund. And I met with her a couple times when she was in college, and I said, Faith, look, we love you. We would love for you to work here, but I'm not going to hire you out of college. I said, I want you to, and we will help you. We'll put in a good word for you. We'll make referrals and references, whatever we need to do. But we want you to go out, work, have a different experience. We want you to have experience with somebody else in another setting. And then we want you to come back and bring everything you learn. And then you can come back and work for Sequoia Fund, but not immediately. And at the time, she thought that was a fine idea. So we started talking to the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development and a couple of other organizations. Hey, we've got a great employee coming your way. Think about hiring her. And then the pandemic hit. The pandemic hit in February, I think. Everything shut down in March, and her graduation was scheduled for May. And we were standing in the kitchen one day when my wife said, you are not going to turn that poor girl out into this horrendous hiring climate, are you? And I thought about it for about a seventh of a second, and I said, no, there's no way I can do that. So I called Faith and I said, would you like to work for Sequoia Fund? And she said, absolutely. I said, here's the deal. We need you to be a risk manager. I need somebody to do the risk management thing, and I think you'd be great at that. But right now, we're not chasing anybody down for the money. We're not knocking on doors saying, where's our money? We're not collecting. We're trying to be gracious. We're trying to extend a lot of grace to our borrowers so that they can just get by. But what I need right now is for somebody to manage our social media. Do you think you could do that until all this blows over? We were confident it would blow over. We just didn't know when. And so she thought that was a pretty good idea. She agreed to that. So we brought her on as our portfolio risk manager and social media manager, thinking that at some point the social media aspect would kind of slide over to the side and she would be able to focus. She still runs our social media. And so she and I have had some recent conversations about, okay, now we know that this part of your job is not going to go away. Let's figure out a way to get you compensated fairly for that. Let's make sure that we've got a way for you to do both of these jobs, wear both of these hats, and be happy with that. She loves doing both of those aspects, but she says it's a real time management challenge for her to do that. especially with a toddler at home. She doesn't have the freedom to work from home like she did before. She has to spend more time in the office to get things done. So we had this entire Gen Z who was facing this terrible hiring climate. And what did they walk into? They walked into chaos. They walked into a job environment where people were trying to figure things out on a daily basis. The bosses wanted everybody to hurry up and get back to the office. Let's get this pandemic over with so everybody can get back to the office. The employees were thinking, man, I really like working from home. Can we do this more? And it was chaos. It was a terrible time because employers didn't know if this lasts too long, am I going to be able to keep this person? Are we going to be able to stay in business? Am I going to be hiring somebody that I'm going to have to lay off in just a few months? What's going to happen? It was so much uncertainty. And along the way, we had Generation Z and part of those later, what we would call the younger millennials, who started to see their desire to change the world as more important as their desire to do the work. Societal change became more important than the work. Well, I don't want to work for a company that puts out porta potties. There's nothing noble in porta potties. I want to change the world. I want to feed the hungry. I want to house the homeless. I want to do the. Okay, that's great. So we started to see another shift happening. It was part of the Great Resignation, but we started to see people leave work that they believed, it was their perception, that the work was less meaningful. Now, if you've ever been in an event and you needed to use the bathroom, you know the importance of having a porta potty. But this is all about perception. And if my perception is that's not a noble pursuit, I want to make a change. I want to go somewhere where I can make a difference. And in fact, when we talk to and when we see surveys among Generation Z, the people who were born between 1993 and 1998 or so, when we start to look at those people and what is their take on this whole world of work, time and time again, they don't focus on money. They don't focus on benefits. It's not that they want to start a great job, work hard, spend 30 years there, take their 401k or their pension and ride off into the sunset. They want to make a difference in the world. They want to know that what they do matters. So as employers, we have to reframe what we're doing. We have to reframe how we talk about our organizations, how we position our organizations, so that we can say, you're never going to win a Nobel Prize by doing this work, but here's the difference you are making. Here's how you're helping people. Here's how you're making the world a better place. We also started to see, especially among this younger generation, and I'm not picking here, this is backed up by data, that young people have always wanted what their parents have. I remember as a teenager, we would cruise around a lake. There was a lake community near where I lived, and we would cruise around the lake, and we would look at all these fancy homes. And at night, it was fun to look in the big window out front because you could drive by and see that they had no furniture. They could afford the house, but they couldn't put anything in it. Kids have always wanted what their parents have. I know that when I graduated college, I wanted to be the CEO of a major corporation on day one. Just hire me to do the job. I have a college education. Let me do this. I know that we have people right now who graduate and they say, well, I don't like what the chief is doing. Maybe I should be chief. Okay, well, great. You have that opportunity. Run for that office. But older generations might look at that and say, hey, know your limitations. Know what you're getting into here. Maybe you need some experience. We have people who believe that they should be getting their fair share. I want to get paid what I think I am due. I want to get paid what I think I am worth, versus an older generation that believed in paying their dues. I actually had a conversation with one of my employees a couple of years ago, and he said, I don't understand why I need to work this long to top out my salary range. What would I know in 5 years that I don't know now? And I said, well, it's not necessarily what you would know, it's what you would have, and you would have experience. And I said, I know you think you know a lot, but you're still asking me questions that in 5 years you won't be asking me. You're still bringing me problems that in 5 years you won't be bringing me. You're still facing challenges that in 5 years won't be challenges to you anymore. They'll be old hat. You'll know exactly what to do in these situations. So I'm not necessarily paying you for the work you're doing in 5 years. I'm paying you for the work you're doing right now, hoping that in 5 years you're worth what we're going to be able to pay you in 5 years. That was difficult for him to hear. Again, this is, and I don't know if there's a memo that people get when they graduate from college that says you should get everything you're due and more just because you're you. So it was a tough conversation for both of us, but he did realize that maybe I do have some dues paying. Now, on the flip side of that, let me say that for generations we have been paying people what I would call a starter wage or a learning wage, when really we should be trying to accelerate that a little bit faster. If we want to keep people, we need to understand that money is important to them, and that maybe paying them a little bit more to make them happy and keep them is less expensive than replacing them. Australia and some other countries have what they call a learning wage. It's a two-tiered minimum wage. If you are in school, if you are in a certification program, if you're in a training program, your minimum wage is going to be X. But once you graduate from that, your minimum wage will never be less than Y. And that is a guarantee that as long as you are, quote unquote, actually working in the workforce and you're not just learning, that you're going to be able to make some money. Now, we also have something that we should be aware of. It's called the prevailing wage. If the minimum wage is $7.35, $7.55, whatever it is, I couldn't even tell you, because the minimum wage around here has not been the minimum wage in forever. If I own a restaurant and I'm paying somebody less than $15 an hour to start, I'm not going to find anybody. So now we're starting to see Burger King, McDonald's, Sonic. We're starting to see a lot of these restaurants, Wendy's. They're advertising between $15 and $17 an hour. Now, Sonic will say starting at $17 an hour, and Wendy's might say starting at $15 an hour, but you never have to work the breakfast shift. Breakfast shift gets a shift differential. You make more if you do that. So it's a very, very tough competition out there, but nobody's relying on the minimum wage. Again, that prevailing wage right now, the prevailing minimum wage is about $15 in our area. It may be higher or lower depending on where you are. But we have to realize that there's been a massive shift in thinking out there in terms of how people view their value to the organization. And here is just a breakdown of those attitudes. In the work environment, employers are looking for people who are going to come back to the office. In fact, Apple, Microsoft, Google are some of the bigger names that have said, if you don't come back to work, you're not going to have a job. We need you in the office because we need you here for collaboration. We need to be able to look over your shoulder and make sure you're doing the work. And we don't know how to build a culture, a work culture, outside of having everybody in the same building. We don't know how to build that culture with you at home, or maybe in another state. Culture building only happens in this building. The employee says, hey, I really like working from home. I really like working from the office. Maybe I want a remote or a hybrid schedule. I'll be in the office. I'm all about work-life balance. I want to be able to spend time with my kids. I want to be able to spend time with my friends. I want to be able to pursue the things that make me happy, but I also know that being happy is going to make me more productive. By emphasizing the structured work hours and the visibility, employers are pretty happy. They like getting things done where they can monitor in a structured environment. The employee says, I can do that from anywhere. I can take this meeting from the beach. If I've got my phone and a decent signal, I got you covered, boss. Not a problem. When it comes to teamwork, again, employers to a large degree believe that teamwork can only happen if everybody's playing on the same court. We believe that everybody's here so that we can collaborate and innovate. And if people are separated, we can't do that. The employee says, I can use these tools to get you what you need from me. So let's take a pause here, get those fingers limbered up, and come onto the chat. What kind of attitudes are you seeing out there on the employer and the employee side? What kind of things are you dealing with right now or experiencing in your workplace? Is there any of this that you have seen? Is there something here that looks familiar to you? Maybe you have someone on your staff or in your midst who has done the quiet quitting or the quiet vacationing thing. What are you seeing out there? If you would go ahead and give me some love in the chat box here. Quiet vacationing and quiet quitting. Okay, yeah, Rona, it's happening. Is this something that other people are noticing? Is this something that the boss is noticing? Is this something that your organization or your agency is starting to try to figure out how to deal with it? Or is it just one of those things where we hope it blows over? We hope they change their minds and come back to the office. While you two are typing, I'm gonna jump in here and say, see, confession is good for the soul, Trevina. Confession is good for the soul. I myself am guilty of the quiet quitting and feel my manager is doing quiet hiring. The battle royale. Okay, I've noticed act your wage attitude from myself and my direct report. So the question is, what are we going to do about that? Let me just talk to you for a moment about how some other companies, some of the bigger companies, and I say companies because we tend to get better data from private companies than we do from government agencies. And I know that some government agencies are wrestling with this. I know that the tribe has wrestled with this, the Eastern Band. I know that the federal government has wrestled with this. It's caused some severe understaffing. There have been companies out there that have tried to do this in a number of different ways. There are companies who have said, look, we're going to let you work remotely. Do what you need to do, and as long as the productivity stays high and is acceptable, you can do what you need to do from there. But one day a month is all we ask, that everybody travel back to the office. We're going to have an all hands meeting, or we're going to have departmental meetings or sub-departmental meetings, and we're going to get together. The quiet vacationing is the boss. Oh, I see. Let's talk about that in just a second. But what they're saying is, look, you come back to the office one day a month so we can reconnect, so that you can get back in touch with the people you work with, so that you can keep those interpersonal connections and maybe meet any of the new team members who have come on board. Depending on how far flung those employees have gone, it might be more frequently than that. It might be once a week. We even have a couple of examples where companies are paying the employees. We will pay your airfare. I don't care if your company is our company is in California, your parents are in New York, you're living close to them to take care of them and their older age, and we get that. We're going to pay for a ticket and a hotel room once a month for you to come back to the office and work. Some of those are synchronous. Some of those companies are doing this in a synchronous way where they just shut everything down for a day or two every month and everybody gets back together and recalibrates. And some of that is asynchronous, where we don't really care what day of the month you come in. Do it when it works for you, but sometime during this calendar month, you need to come into the office and you need to be here for a day. Maybe you need to be here for 2 days, and then you can go back home. So rather than traveling away for work, they're traveling back to work. So the quiet vacationing, let's take a pause here and take a look. The quiet vacationing is the boss, and the quiet quitting is a few of the employees. Well, is it any wonder? Is it any wonder that the people are quiet quitting when the boss is never around? Now, I'll admit, I am doing this today. Our office is in Cherokee, North Carolina. I am in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I'm almost never around, but my staff knows that if they need me, I'm probably going to respond to an email in about 30 seconds and a phone call in just a minute or two. I am never out of touch. They can send me a text. They could probably send me a text right now. I would answer it, and you would never know that I've answered the text. I'm not going to do that because I'm trying to honor your time here, but you get where I'm going with this. Let's see. Trina says, I feel a lot of this is because the teams are remote, a lot of lack of effective communication, constant changes. We all feel like we're just trying to stay afloat. Trevina, you've hit the nail on the head, trying to stay afloat. But our manager has introduced in-person team meetups based on team locations and requires us to do in-person job field visits where the construction team we support are working. And how do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? We talk a lot about the word equity gets bandied around in the workplace a lot, but the kind of equity that I'm going to talk about here is probably not going to be the kind of equity you're used to hearing about. The kind of equity that I'm going to talk about is the equity of work and value. If I am bringing clear value to the team and I am bringing clear dedication to the team, I would expect you to bring an equitable level of value and dedication to the team. If my job requires me to work 60 hours a week, your job requires you to work 40 hours a week, you're never going to bring an equal level of value or dedication because it's not required of you. But I would expect an equitable distribution in that dedication. And so what I would want to do as a supervisor, as a boss, is I would want to try to figure out how do we cater more to what you need and let me make some more adjustments in what I have to do. Because I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I'm easily replaceable. But if my entire team quiet quits, or if they just quit, that's a lot tougher for the organization to recover from. So yes, while it is nice to see everybody in person, socialize together, you also need to share some of those challenges. We have a team meeting, an all hands meeting at 10:30 every Monday morning. And if I'm traveling, if I'm on vacation, it doesn't matter. If anybody's on vacation, we still have that team meeting. If half of us are at a conference, we still have that team meeting because it's important for people to get face to face. My office used to be a conference room. We removed the conference table. We now have some nice, comfortable mid-century modern chairs that are sitting around a leather drum, and that drum has become the centerpiece of our conference room. And so we all get together there, kind of knee to knee, face to face, talking about issues. And even if we don't have anything pressing work related to talk about, that becomes our social time. And for about an hour and a half every Monday, we catch up. What are the kids doing? You know, so-and-so's kid took their first step or said their first words. So-and-so had an adventure this weekend that they want to talk about, or somebody's got something coming up that they need some help with. Sometimes we've been known to just sit around and talk about what are our Netflix recommendations for this week. Now, as a Generation X supervisor, as a leader, It took me a long time to get okay with that. My millennial second in command came to me one day and she said, Russ, we're just going to have to be social. She said, I know that this bothers you. It bothers me too, but for an hour and a half a week, let's just reconnect and it's going to be okay. And she was exactly right. And for that hour and a half every week, whether we get anything done substantial or not, it's okay. It's okay. So maybe now is the time I need to stop and talk about what we did at Sequoia Fund. Because I think what we did and how we handled the pandemic and its aftermath could inform how you make some changes in your workplace. At the outset of the pandemic, we started moving everything to Zoom. We had not really, the tribe was on Teams, the tribe used Teams, and we had had just enough of a taste of Teams to really not like it very much. But we use Zoom for some of our webinars, some of our small business education programming, and we like Zoom. And we said, okay, Zoom has really kind of kicked it up a notch, and they've got some really cool things. It's easy to use. Everybody likes it. Let's just use Zoom. And we did daily check-ins. We did weekly check-ins. I did a weekly, not really a newsletter, but I did a weekly email to our board just to let them know what was going on. I was on the phone to our attorney every single day talking about, if we're going to do such and such for our loan clients, how do we do that in a way that doesn't cause us to do more work in the end? It doesn't cause us to have to come back and rework, and it doesn't cost us anything in terms of legal challenges. How are we going to get that done? So everybody worked from home. We established workflows so that loans could get processed remotely. They could get closed remotely. We started using DocuSign. We started using a lot of different technology. And we started using a platform called Asana, and I'm going to put that in the chat there. We started to use Asana as a project management, process management tool. There are other tools out there. There's Trello, there's Monday. There's just a lot of other things, but we liked the way Asana looked and felt, and it was just easy for us to use. We could share documents and things. Since the end of COVID, we've moved away from Asana and we've started going back to Teams only because our IT folks are like, hey, Asana, if you're kind of piecemealing all these technologies together, it's not really secure. Let's kind of keep everything in one ecosystem. Didn't make anybody happy, but it was one of those things we had to do. But we loved Asana. And as we started to, another thing is we could not go into the office for a long time. The Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians shut the tribe down. In fact, they put literal guards at the borders. There are several ingress and egress points into the Qualla boundary here in Western North Carolina, and they put constant checkpoints monitoring who came onto the boundary and who left the boundary. If you live on the boundary and you needed to go shopping, you still had to show your enrollment card to get back onto the boundary. If you didn't live on the boundary, even if you're an enrolled member, if you didn't live on the boundary, you had to have a letter showing cause. Why do you have to be there? So one of the first things I did was I wrote a letter. In fact, I contacted the chief and I said, hey, do you have a template? Is there anything that you want to use? And he said, I really don't, but here's kind of what it needs to say. And we'll start disseminating that information. But I created a letter that everybody could use because it could be somebody different at the checkpoint every day. They hand that letter to the person at the checkpoint. It says, my office is here. I have to be here. And they got through without fail. That was a huge challenge. It was something that I'd never really considered. We don't have Sequoia Fund security badges where it gets you into the building, let alone onto the Qualla boundary. But a lot of my employees don't live on the boundary. So that was an issue we had to deal with. We created all of these technology workarounds, and and it started to flow, and it was really nice, and things were getting done, and things were getting done actually much faster than they would typically get done in the office, which was nice because then it gave people a little extra free time that they didn't really expect. We started to communicate with our community in ways that we hadn't before. As a CDFI, uh, the Sequoia Fund was privy to a lot of information coming out from the Federal Reserve, the Small Business Administration, U.S. Treasury, and a lot of other entities on how small businesses can navigate the pandemic. And we realized pretty quickly people were not reading the emails. We would send out an email, and for days we would get the same question. And if people had only read the email, they wouldn't have that question. So while people would not spend 30 seconds reading an email, we realized that they would watch a 3-minute video. So we started creating videos, and in everything that we sent out, it was just a talking head video telling people, here's what you need to do. Here's the website. We'd pop the website URL up on the screen, or we would put a QR code up there on the screen. We found out that was much more effective. And of course, we wanted to communicate within our own team virtually. One of the things we had to do was get people to turn their camera on. That was a must. If you have somebody who is off camera, they can be doing anything, probably not listening, probably not paying attention, and certainly not engaging. So we had a cameras on rule. When we came back to the office, we realized that people were so used to multitasking that they wanted to have their phone in their hand or in their lap. And we've started to have to, have a phones off rule, or leave your phone in your office when you come into the meeting, or throw it in a basket as you walk in the door, because people will sit and check email. They won't engage with each other. And we needed to reestablish those human to human connections. But one of the things we did was we sent out a climate survey. And we asked everybody, what did we do before the pandemic? And I'm happy if and at the end, the last slide you're going to get is got my email address on it. And if you want a copy of the survey, please just send me an email. I'll be happy to send you the climate survey. You can always modify it. I mean, we are a few years past the end of COVID, but I think it was still valuable. One of the questions that we asked was, what did we do before COVID that you really liked, that you want to start doing again? What did we do before COVID that you hated and you never want to go back to? What was one of the things that we started doing, or what are some of the things we did during COVID that you like and you would like to continue doing? And what did we do during COVID that you want to get rid of? We need to scrap it. We took that information from those simple questions, and there were a few others, but from those simple questions, we started to get a picture that people really liked working from home. They enjoyed working from home. They felt more productive at home. They also saw that there was a need to be back in the office. Everyone realized that we are a customer-facing organization. And if we have a large number of our clients in the community who are never going to make a phone call, they're never going to use our online appointment setting scheduling software. They're never going to set an appointment. They're going to walk in the door. In fact, I've been on vacation before, and I've had people walk in my office when I come back from vacation. I say, I was here every day last week, and you weren't here. I came in to see if I could find you every day. And I said, well, did Shayla not tell you? Yeah, Shayla told me you were on vacation, but I just thought, well, heck, I'll come by and see if he's here. So every day they showed up thinking I might magically appear. So we know that we have people who are not going to use that technology. We know that we have people who are going to walk in, and we need to have someone in the office. We started to think about what does this mean for us now, and what could this mean for us going forward? How could the way we do work at Sequoia Fund become a recruiting tool for recruiting the best people out there? Yes, Sequoia Fund is a nonprofit. We're tribally affiliated, but we're not a tribal program. We don't have all the big safety nets that the tribe has in terms of the pension plan and, a huge payroll team. We have to pay for that ourselves. Um, there are just a lot of things that we enjoy about not being part of the tribe, but there are also things that we don't enjoy by not being part of the tribe. So when our auditor said, "Hey, you don't pay like a small nonprofit," our argument has always been we don't compete with we don't compete with little charities. We don't compete with pet rescue operations. We don't compete with things like that. We compete with financial organizations. We compete with the tribe itself. And if we're going to be competitive, we may not always be able to compete on pay. So let's look at how do we compete on lifestyle. Everybody wanted to work from home, but they saw the value in being in the office. We created a schedule by which everyone can now work 4 days a week. We are closed on Fridays. Our operation works Monday through Thursday. And the reason we did this, we started looking at the data. How many calls do we get? How many walk-ins do we get? How many people actually show up on Fridays? Well, we were sending people home early anyway because there was just nothing going on Fridays. So let's cut Fridays out altogether. Now, are we going to work 4 10s? Do we need 4 10s? Part of what we were researching was telling us that 40 hours a week was an illusion from the get-go. In an office environment, I can't remember if it was Princeton or Yale years ago did a study. I think it was Princeton. Did a study that found the average 40-hour work week in an office environment actually yielded about 17 hours of productive work. Now think about that for a second. We're there for 40 hours, but we're working for less than half of that. If you have to drive to the office to be there for 40 hours to work for 17, yet you could stay at home, drive 0 hours, work for 30 hours, and be productive for 20 hours or 30 hours, what makes more sense? So we scrapped the 40-hour work week. We went to 4 9-hour work days. We have people who like to get up early. Those morning people, I'll never understand them. I have 2 people who get into the office every morning at 7 a.m. They love working for an hour or 2 before people start to flood in. It gives them time to focus on their paperwork and getting things done. They love it. Hey, more power to them. We have a couple people who like to work late simply because of their morning schedule. That works okay too. Our only rule is somebody has to be in the office for that entire scheduled work week. Somebody has to be in the office until all the customers are gone and they lock that building up. And we're in a tribal building, so they're going to lock it. So we're closed on Friday. We work Monday through Thursday. On Tuesday or Wednesday, because I'm no fool, I know that if you can work from home on Monday or if you can work from home on Thursday, it's probably going to fall into that quiet quitting or quiet vacationing, and people are going to use that time. But on Tuesday or Wednesday, sandwiched right there in the middle, you have the option of working from home. I have a couple of people who every Tuesday they work from home, or every Wednesday they work from home. And then somebody said, well, what about holidays? Now in Cherokee, we have a lot of holidays. We have all the federal holidays. We have the banking holidays. But we also have some very tribal specific holidays, and probably you're in the same situation. You may have some of those. We have Elders Day. We have Fair Day. We have a lot of different things that come up through the year. Okay, those are probably never going to be on a Monday, but if there is a holiday during that week, there is no work from home day that week. So if Monday is Labor Day, there's no work from home day. You have to be in the office 3 days a week. If the holiday is on a Friday, oh well, you're home anyway. We're not taking an extra day. unless that day is maybe the 4th of July. And then, we'll work around that. We work on the tribe schedule. If the tribe says everybody gets the 3rd off, we'll adhere to that. Monday through Thursday, 9 hours a day. 2 of those days can be work from home days. Everybody's in the office on Monday. Even we have one employee who is fully remote, 100% remote, and she's there at 10:30 every Monday. And people love it. People love it. Our board loves it because and in fact, our new chief financial officer, he took a pay cut to come to work for us because this works better for his lifestyle. He loves having Fridays off. And I asked him the other day, I said, Ashford, if anything changed and we need to go back to a 5-day work week, how would that work for you? And he said, I don't know that I'd stay here. He said, I would probably have to try to find something now, even if it's not an ideal situation. If I could have three days off in the weekend, I would probably look to do that. And he's got various reasons for doing that I understand. And I wasn't saying that we're going to change it, but I like to find out where people are. They, I've got some people who are, they take their day to work from home, and that's the day that their kid stays at home with them. Their preschooler gets to stay home, and it works really well. But the key is I have to be the one as the boss. I can't do the quiet quitting thing. I cannot be the one who's doing the vacation there, Rona. I can't be that one. I've got to be the boss. I've got to actually be there and exhibit some leadership. But even if I'm remote, there's still a way to do that. But the only way to make this happen is to sit down and talk about it, and talk about how are we taking care of our customers? How are we taking care of each other? How are we taking care of the organization? Is there anything else we need to be taking care of? Because if I'm only taking care of me, and you're only taking care of you, we're not going to be any good to anybody else. So the first thing we want to do is come together around those core values. Let's define those core values. And for Sequoia Fund, our core values were that we got to take care of our customers. We're here for the small businesses in and around Cherokee, and if we don't take care of them, we're not going to be playing that critical role in building our economy that we should be. So let's define those core values and let's communicate those to each other. Let's come around those together and keep those in front of us. Let's make sure we're articulating a clear vision. Let's make sure we're letting people know exactly why we're here, and not just people on the outside of the organization, not just our board members, but inside the walls. What is our vision? And sometimes I find myself reminding people, yes, that's a difficult client. Yes, that client may be wrong, but that client is still a client, and we're here for her. Let's take care of her. And we've got to walk the talk. We've got to adhere to those core values, because if people see us communicating core values and we're not adhering to them, we've blown it. We need to lead by example. As for me, I've got to model some behavior. Boy, coming back from COVID was tough because people were loving wearing blue jeans and t-shirts and shorts and flip-flops. But on day one, I had to start wearing the slacks and the Sequoia Fund golf shirt. Just let people know that this is the way we're going to dress around here again. We got to go back to being business people. No more. And of course, I've got a segment of my younger employees who thought that because we're not working on Fridays anymore, that Thursday is now casual Thursday. That is not the case. We don't have a casual Thursday. It's just called Thursday. But we've got to demonstrate commitment. We got to demonstrate commitment. And I stood up to our board. Our board at one point, a couple of months ago, said, maybe we need to stop this Friday stuff. Let's get back to the office on Friday. And I said, absolutely not. I said, you can get rid of me if you want to, but I'm not going to be the one to make that happen. I said, people love this. It is a huge benefit of this job. I like it. I've not been able to take any Fridays off since we started this, but it is a huge benefit. for working for Sequoia Fund. So let's keep this commitment. Empathy and transparency. We have to understand that happy people don't leave happy places. Let me say that again. Happy people don't leave happy places. We don't want to make them so happy that they're not getting anything. We don't want them to be happy because this is vacation land, right? But by showing some empathy and being transparent with people, letting people know where we stand and what's going on, and being open with people, that is a path to keeping people happy. People may not always like the answer they get from me. People may not always like the circumstances that we're in. People may not always like that, hey, we've got a grant that does this and I don't want to do that. But by being that transparent and showing some empathy, that, yeah, I don't like it either, but this is what we got to do. We're leading by example, and that's going to keep people engaged. I want to tell you something about recognition and rewards. This is a little something that you might want to try. When we celebrate wins, we celebrate commitment, we celebrate birthdays. You have the option of taking the day off for your birthday, or you have the option of everybody taking you out to lunch for your birthday. I've got a couple of people, they love doing lunch. Great. But I want to talk to you about PSR. PSR. I'm going to type this down here in the chat. If I could type, I'd be dangerous. PSR stands for Planned Spontaneous Recognition. Planned spontaneous recognition is just that. As a leader, you're going to, and you don't have to be a boss to be a leader, by the way. As a leader, you're going to think of something every day that you're going to look for, and you're going to try to catch someone else doing something good, doing something right, maybe following a policy, maybe helping a client, maybe just in the way they do something. You're going to be looking every day for somebody doing something good or right. And when you see it, you're going to recognize them publicly. Planned, spontaneous recognition. Now, the beauty of planned spontaneous recognition is that you plan it and it is spontaneous. And if you don't see it happening, nobody knew you were looking for it to begin with. So they've lost nothing. But when people start to see that they are getting recognized from their peers or from their leadership for doing something right, then people start to respond to that type of recognition. I've always said, never, ever underestimate what a grown person will do for a gold star. We're all kindergartners at heart. We love some recognition, no matter how small that token is. We love being recognized, and we love it when somebody says, thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing a good job. Thank you for holding the door for that customer who was using a walker. That means a lot to her. But planned spontaneous recognition can come from anyone, to anyone, and it's powerful. It's super powerful. Zig Ziglar, great sales trainer. He's passed on now, but his work lives on. Anything that you can read by Zig Ziglar, this guy will change your attitude in a heartbeat. He was so upbeat. Everything that he wrote was so positive. He said, you can have everything in life you want if you will just help other people get what they want. Now, he was talking about sales, but you could apply this to life. If I'm helping my employees get what they want out of the workplace, they're going to help me get what I need. They're going to take care of me. They're going to take care of our customers. They're going to take care of the tribe. They're going to do the right thing. If we start to help other people get what they want and what they need, things will start to happen. There are some common threads throughout all of this. People want flexibility and autonomy. Is there a way that we could help people have that flexibility and some ownership of their job without saying you have to be here in this seat, clock in, clock out, do this, do that? Is there a way that we could hire really good people and trust them to do the right thing, but hold them accountable when they don't? I think that's possible. We need to have a level of honesty and clarity. You know, I don't like it when I have to call people out on things, but if I'm absolutely certain that somebody's not working from home on the day they're supposed to be working from home, we're gonna have a little moment of honesty and clarity. Can we give people opportunities for growth? Again, people are looking for something bigger than themselves today. They're not looking for great pay. They're looking for opportunity to change the world. Can we help them do that in the job they have? This is a little bit about that employee survey that I told you I would be happy to send you. We went to 4 nines, optional work from home day, a lot of customer communication. It turns out we didn't have to do a whole lot of communication to let people know we weren't working Friday. They never noticed it to begin with. Regular meetings, we let everybody have ownership of their job. And my job right now is to make sure people find the training they need. Here's how we hold each other accountable. We got to let go of the old standards. We're not going back to 2019. Our old habits of requiring somebody to be in a job, in a seat, in a position, clocked in, clocked out, those habits have to go away. We've got to start thinking differently. We have to hold people to those commitments, though. And ROW, really, this is what Sequoia Fund is all about these days. A ROW is a results-only work environment. Results-only work environment. And I have to remind myself as an older guy, the focus is on results. If people are getting me the results, I may not be happy with their methods and how they got it done. Maybe they worked after dinner last night and got it done. But if that works for them, I'm happy with the result. We got to do regular check-ins, and we're always talking about trust and teamwork. Folks, that's it for me. You have my email address right here. If you want a copy of that survey, more than happy to send it out. And I'm going to send it out in a Word format so that you can change it, do whatever you want to with it. But if there's anything else that comes up, if you chew on some of this stuff for a little while and you say, I'd really like to ask Russ a question, the deal that I make with the Native Learning Center is that you can reach out to me. I will be happy to answer those questions, have a little email chat with you, and maybe help put you on the right path. At this, I'm going to say I appreciate you spending some time with me this afternoon. You could have spent the last hour and a half doing almost anything, and I'm honored you spent it with me. I'm going to turn it back over to Brooke. Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you so much, Russ. Another fantastic presentation. And this was 2 in a row. You are a rock star. I did go ahead and launch that webinar feedback survey for everybody. If y'all could just take a minute or two to complete that for us. Like I said, it always helps us to know what is working really well, what we can improve upon for the future, maybe even suggestions for future webinars you'd like to see. Just remember they are anonymous, so you can be as candid as you would like. And we hope you can join us for our next webinar. That will actually be tomorrow. This is going to be a follow-up webinar to Communication Concepts Part 1 that occurred a couple weeks ago. This is done by Lisa I. Perez, and registration's free as always. Feel free to access this as well as any of our other recorded webinars online. They're available on our website, nativelearningcenter.com. We have a whole Cathedra webinar section, and it has a lot of recorded webinars. The archive goes back for about 2 years. So feel free to view them, share them with your friends, share them with your colleagues. And please also check out our upcoming events posted to our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we even have an in-house produced podcast, the Hopathanga Native American podcast. Our episodes discuss more focused topics within tribal housing and self-determination. So you can find that on Simplecast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you prefer to watch the interviews with our guests, we do post all of those videos to our YouTube channel. So feel free to check those out. All right, folks, I just want to thank everybody once again for joining us today. Thank you so much, Russ, for a great presentation. I did launch the webinar feedback survey once already, but know when I close out the webinar, it is going to pop up again. So I'm just going to wish everybody a fantastic rest of their day, and I hope to connect again with you really soon. Thanks again, Russ.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody take care.